Do you wish you could needle felt a practical gift that won't take days to finish? Well, I've come up with a way of needle felting a cute hamster without having to needle felt fur all over the body, making this homemade craft gift much quicker to complete.
He's not as cute as me. Just saying.
No, of course he isn't. Anyway, I'll share more about this idea and some tips as we go along. So let's get started. First off, I rolled up some carded Corriedale wool and started stabbing all around it to form an oval shape, and it needs to be an off-white colour. I'll explain why later. I'm using my drawing as a guide for the size and felting it until firm all over. I'll share my drawing in this image that inspired me on my website, and I'll tell you where I got the image from at the end. Now it's time to add the eyes. But how do you know where to put them on the felted head? Well, this first tip will help enormously. Take a strip of paper and use it to measure where the eyes are vertically on the drawing, and then use a needle to mark where that is on your hamster's head. And in the same way, measure how far apart they are and mark them on your felted head by stabbing a small hole for each eye. Now for the plastic eyes and my next tip. Before gluing your eyes into the head, make an indent around those holes so that when you glue the plastic eyes in, they are slightly sunken and look really cute. Once you've made a hole for the posts of the eyes with an awl, check the size of the eyes and how deep they sit. I changed mine for slightly smaller 6mm eyes in the end. You may have noticed that when I shaped the head, I was only stabbing it on one side. That's because for what we're making, we want the back to be flat. I'll explain more about this later, but stab the back in just one direction to get it nice and flat. If you're wondering how to shape the head to look more like a hamster, then my third tip will help you enormously. The thing is, shaping doesn't have to happen all in one go. You can do it gradually by adding more wool. So for this hamster, we want to build up the nose and mouth area. So I've rolled up some more of the core carded wool into a small sausage and attached it from the middle to the right side, and then did the same again, overlapping the middle slightly so that the nose stands out more.
Well, that looks weird, and you can see the join lines.
I know, don't worry, we'll get to the joins in a minute. Looking at the image, I realise I need to add another 2 small pieces of rolled up carded wool, which creates that distinctive cute nose and mouth shape that these little creatures have.
You can still see the lines.
Right then, okay, we best sort them out. So my next tip will blend in all this shaping and make any visible join lines completely disappear. Simply take a flat thin amount of carded wool and felt it over the top of these pieces we've added, and over any joins that are showing. Stabbing this over the top will blend it all in, and you wouldn't even know we'd added any extra wool. Check that you're happy with the head size at this point, as we're going to add fur soon, which will make it look even larger than it is at the moment. The next thing I had to tackle was the ears. On this image, the ears are dark on the inside and white on the outside. This can be tricky, but before I tackle that problem, how am I going to get the ears the lovely shape that they are on this image? Well, I started folding some carded Corriedale wool about 3 or 4 times, and then folded it over the opposite way. Then I stabbed down the middle of this wool to create 2 ear shapes back to back. I stabbed around the inside of each ear to firm them up slightly, and I took my scissors and cut the wool in half down the middle where I'd initially been stabbing. Then I stabbed the back of the ear to close up the back and firm up all round the inside of the ear to create a nice little cup shape, and then did the same with the other ear. But how was I going to get the inside of the ear a dark brown colour without ruining the colour of the back of the ear? Well, this next tip will help to reduce the amount of brown wool that bleeds through and shows up on the white wool. First I mixed 2 browns together to make the right shade for the inside of the hamster's ear. Then I felted this mixed colour into a flat piece of wool, which I then cut into the shape of the ear. But here's the important bit. I attach this brown felted wool very carefully by having my needle at an angle while stabbing it. This will push the fibres across and into the ear, rather than through and out the back of the ear. You might still get a tiny bit of colour coming through, but this will help to keep it to a minimum. Then before attaching the ears, you can use pins to make sure you have them in the right position and angle before going ahead and stabbing the base of the ear into the head. So for the nose, the only shade of pink of wool I had was roving or tops wool, so I quickly hand-carded a small amount first by pulling and mushing it up together so that the fibres went in lots of different directions. So my tip is, don't despair if you only have the colour you need in tops or roving wool. You can still use it by mushing it up first. As you can see, I've taken a small amount and felted it lightly into a small blob first before attaching it to the head, and then I'm shaping and stabbing it as I attach it, angling a 40 gauge triangular needle to make 2 nostrils. Then I went over it with a 42 gauge triangular needle to make the needle holes less visible. Now how am I going to get a nice fine line for the mouth, I hear you ask?
I didn't ask. Wasn't me.
Okay, well, I'll tell you anyway.
I'm not sure I'm interested, but you go ahead.
Well, I took a tiny bit of dark brown wool and twisted it to make a thin line of wool. I placed it just under the nose, across where I wanted the line to start, and stabbed it to attach it. I trimmed off the spare bit of wool and, holding the line in place, stabbed it downwards slightly before curving it round to the right and stabbing it in place. Trim the end and then hold another thin twisted piece of wool over the middle and curve it to the left side of the mouth, stabbing as you go. Remember, it's easy to add more wool than take it away, so here I've added a tiny bit more to fill in the middle bit. So the reason why we're only making the head is because I wanted to make the hamster look like it's poking its head out of a hole, a bit like this picture. So to do this, I need to tackle making its cute little hands. First, we're going to make each finger. Yes, this was very fiddly. Roll up a tiny amount of pink wool into a small sausage shape. Carefully stab it and keep rotating and stabbing it. Don't worry though about the shape of the fingers too much. Once you've attached them to the hand, it's much easier to shape them and make them smaller and neater. I felted 8 fingers in total. Yes, apparently hamsters only have 4 fingers on each of their front paws and 5 toes on their back paws.
Lucky them. I don't have any fingers.
Anyway, for the paw, roll up a slightly larger amount of the same coloured carded pink wool and stab it into a small blob shape. Then you can attach each finger in a row. Now that they're attached to something larger, you can shape them some more. As you can see, this has also allowed me to curve the fingers, as if they're gripping onto the edge of the hole. Now we need to coat the head with fur, but if you're new to adding fur and wondering how do I do that and where do I start?
Again, I didn't ask.
Well, if you had, I would have said, don't worry, I'll talk you through it. So we're going to mix up some peach and this yellow roving or tops wool and cut it into lengths of about 3/4 to an inch. So my next tip on where to start is at the very back of the head, creating rings around the head and gradually working forwards. This will help you add the wool evenly and gradually create layers of fur. So take some of the coloured wool we've cut and lay it so that the middle of the lengths is in line with the back of the head, and stab along the middle of this fur so that you're attaching it to the back edge of the head. Go over this line 2 or 3 times. You can use a crown type needle to do this, but also a 40 gauge regular triangular needle works just fine. Fold one side of the wool over and stab along the joint just to make sure it's securely attached. Repeat this around the next section of the head until you've attached a first row of wool all the way back to where you started.
Now he looks a bit like a strange lion.
Yeah, he'll look even stranger soon, but don't worry, once we've trimmed him he'll look completely different. Now you can start on the next row of fur. I like to place quite thin layers of wool at around 3/16 of an inch apart. I find this creates a good fur coat on a small object. But if you're doing a larger object, or using thicker layers, you might not need to do them quite so close together. As I move down the face, I also changed the colours of the wool I've used to give him some cream patches, and I attached fur around his eyes too. Nearer to his nose and mouth area, I made sure I used an off-white coloured roving or tops wool that matched the carded corridale I used to make the core of his head. I'll explain why I did this after we've trimmed his fur. At this point, you might be wondering how the heck is that ever going to look like a hamster?
You took the words right out of my mouth.
You need to have faith in the process. Now this is the fun bit where it's transformed by a haircut. First comb out the fur with your needle so that it's sticking out from the head and isn't matted or clumped together. This will make it easier to trim. Start by trimming off the very long strands of wool. My best tip on trimming fur is only cut a little bit off at a time. Remember, you can always trim it shorter, but you can't stick it back on. So take your time and keep referring to the image. Carefully cut the fur above the eyes so it's a bit shorter than the sides. Eventually, he'll start looking more like a fluffy hamster. But even though the fur around the eyes is a bit shorter, you'll need to keep it back from being in front of his eyes. So gently stab some of the fur down all around the eyes. You can't see the ears very well at the moment though. So comb out the fur again and check for any long strands and trim a tiny bit more in front of the ears. But to make it a bit more realistic, you can cut inwards towards the fur, especially where it changes colour. I've finished trimming now, but at the moment you can see where the fur starts, especially on his chin. So my next tip will really help blend this line of fur in with the area that hasn't got any fur attached. Earlier I mentioned I wanted the fur attached here to be the same colour as his face. This was so that we can use a 40 gauge reverse felting needle to reverse felt the chin just in front of the last line of attached wool fur, which makes the chin slightly fuzzy as it pulls out some of the carded off white wool from the head. If you'd like more on reverse felting, I talk about this in my needle felting needles video. I'll put a link in the description. This reverse felting blends the face in with the line of fur beautifully and makes the line magically disappear. Now you can attach its cute little hands by pinning in position and using a bit of extra pink wool if necessary. But it wouldn't look right without whiskers. I used nylon invisible thread and a needle and threaded them through at various angles. One little tug though and they'd come out, so I pulled each one slightly too far one way, and with a tiny blob of superglue on my awl, I dabbed a tiny amount on the whisker and pulled it back into position. This was enough to glue the whiskers in place. In a minute I'll let you into a secret about this image I was using as inspiration. But first we're going to transform this hamster into a cute fridge magnet that will make it the perfect gift. So the black circle in the background of my drawing is going to be a circle of magnetic self-adhesive sheet. After working out the size of the circle needed and cutting it out, I thought I might be able to use a self-adhesive to stick the hamster straight on. But after doing this, I realised it left the rest of the exposed circle still sticky and looking grey rather than black. So I stuck the self-adhesive side to some black card, cut round the magnet and superglued the hamster's head onto the magnetic disc. So the secret about the image that I was inspired by was that it's actually been generated by AI. Yes, it's not real, but it looks so cute I wanted to try and make something similar. So there's one more thing you'll need to master to make your needle felted items look great, and that's knowing how to improve your shape. And in this video, I don't just show you one technique, I reveal 10 things I wish I knew when I started needle felting, which will make your items look amazing. Thanks for watching.